Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everybody. I'm so glad to have you all here today. This is a topic, like Meg was saying, that is near and dear to my heart personally, but I know as female lawyers, it's probably near and dear to your hearts as well. And we have a great session tonight. In the last few months, we've received probably about 20 different questions that have been asked by different women in law within allied law. And we've gathered all of those questions and put them together. And we're going to go through each one of them with our panelists tonight to cover them. And I'm going to introduce the panelists in a moment. But the other thing I wanted to share, and that is that because we're a smaller group, if you have questions about things that are really important to you that you want to make sure that are addressed or even brought up, you can put them into the chat box now or throughout the presentation, and you can even put it in private mode, so we don't need to single anybody out like so-and-so wants to know this. You can put it in private mode either directly to me or to Meg, but put your questions in. This presentation is for you and hopefully will help you throughout your career as you grow and develop into it. And on that note, I'd like to introduce our panelists for this evening. We're very fortunate to have an amazing group with us, and we'll start with it by introducing Carol Kerfoot. She's a partner in Allied Law's Vancouver, British Columbia member firm Kornfeld. She has extensive experience in a broad range of business and real estate transactions, including acquisitions and divestitures, business startups, and non-institutional financing. Then Sarah Manley is a principal in Allied Law's Melbourne and Sydney, Australia member firm Russell Kennedy, and she represents government clients and statutory authorities in relation to prosecutions, professional conduct, coronial inquests, and administrative law. Excuse me. And Lisa Wong, who is a partner in Allied Law's Hong Kong member firm Boase, Cohen and Collins. She specializes in family law, where she represents clients in divorce and separation, child custody, and financial application, worship, and Hague applications. And I hope I said that. I hope I said that right, Hague. So welcome everybody, welcome our panelists, and let's get this show on the road. Let's get started here. One of the topics that comes up a lot, and as Meg was saying, I do a lot of work with women in law and women's leadership programs. And something that is frequently brought up is this whole idea of, work-life balance. Is there such a thing as work-life balance? Can I find it? Can I get it? Where is it hiding? And in fact, McKinsey recently did a study, I think it was just a year and a half ago, that showed that that's one of the women's biggest concerns, is finding, a way to have balance, and women feel that differentiates them from their male counterparts. So I'm going to post this question to our panelists and say, what are your thoughts around it? Is there such a thing, or how can you get it? Because at the end of this presentation, our hope is that you'll walk away with some ideas and tips that you can then put into practice yourself. So I'm going to open it up to our panelists. Where should we start? Sarah?
Well, my approach in relation to work-life balance is I don't technically believe that you can just have it all at the same time. And I try not to focus on that particularly, because I think at different times there'll be different pools in your life where either your children or an elderly family member or your work pressure might be such that you have to invest more time in that. In that said, I try to prioritise and try to continuously assess if I feel like I'm achieving what I want to, and whether or not I feel like I'm spending enough time with my children. I think most people say that they often feel like they sometimes come last, and that's obviously something that we would all grapple with, and I don't think I've got the answers in relation to that. But I do prioritise even when I'm really busy trying to exercise, because I think that that's a really important part of my day, is having an hour to go and do some exercise. So for me, that's skipping an hour's sleep. So I prioritise less sleep to get my exercise in and to have that as my me time.
Very important to put yourself on the list for sure. Carol, how about for you?
Well, I think I agree with Sarah that it's possible to have it all, but rarely can you have it all at the same time. And but I think one of the benefits that we have is that women generally are great multitaskers. And so we are able to split ourselves into more pieces than our male counterparts. But I think that what troubles us in the balance is generally the desire and the demand that we do that for more. And the approach that I have taken to resist, sometimes better, sometimes not so well, the more is to say, look, I'm prepared, recognizing that, you know, I've had 4 kids and a life, to not and expect of myself the productivity nor the income that goes with not having that, because ultimately, you know, whether we like it or not, it's generally billings are such a huge element of our total compensation that if we say, look, you know what, I'm 100% partner, but my productivity, you know, is 2/3, let's say, of my male counterpart who has a stay-at-home wife who looks after his house and his kids for him. And that has to be okay. That has not be less than. That has to be not second rate. That has to be 100. That has to be 100%, because it is 100% of what I've got. If I want to have all the other things in my life that he doesn't have in his.
Great point. I mean, I like what you said. It's like you can't have it all. You can have it all, but not at the same time. And it's really true. It's to recognize that point. And you can't always compete with what somebody else has that you might not. Lisa, how about for you?
Yes, well, I agree that prioritization is very important. Hello, you can hear me? Yes, okay, right, because there was a problem with my microphone earlier. Yes, prioritization is very important, because I find that women are very responsible, and you know, they want to take care of everybody and everything. So it's very easy to fall into the, you know, the trap that, you know, you just want to spend all your time dealing with all the other stuff instead of yourself and your life. So what I do is, as Sarah just said, you know, sleep less, do your exercise. And this, because exercise is the time where you can actually, you know, be yourself and you're doing something good for yourself. So I do that as well. And I try not to check my emails all the time after work. And, you know, if there's something that's not urgent, because I know that a lot of times you're just tempted to reply as soon as possible. But I try not, if there's something that's not urgent, I try not to do that. And you can draft the email and send it off the next morning instead of doing that, you know, on the spot and there and then. I find that that is something that you need to work on. It just doesn't come naturally to you, like work-life balance. You just need to work on it and try not to be tempted and take care of everything instead of yourself. I try to find at least an hour for myself every day, and also, you know, for my kids as well. So, you know, so I won't be eaten up by work.
Okay, so prioritization, make time for yourself is very important. And it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to do it. And it does take time, I'm imagining, to kind of figure out the how. One of the things that Carol brought up, which I thought was interesting, and it is a segue into like the next question, which is, you know, to compare yourself and what you can accomplish in terms of your productivity to somebody who has somebody to take care of the stuff that you're busy multitasking and doing is hard. Why is it that, you know, women demand more of themselves than perhaps men do in terms of our workload. Like, hey, we do it all, and that's just the way it is. It's like we have our own double standards that we try to maintain. And what are your thoughts on that from around our panel?
Well, I think particularly with women in law, everyone's quite an A-type personality. And so a lot of the women that I know who are in law just see you know, they just want to be on top of everything. They want to be at the top of their game in the workforce, but they also want to be the best they can at home. So I do feel that with a lot of my friends, that even though they've got young families, they're just trying to do as much as possible and still be a really great and present mum. I think with the male partners at our firm, the thing that I've noticed the biggest shift has been is that with the men in their 30s now, I think that the conversation has changed and they're not ashamed to say, I'm leaving the office now because I've got to go and pick up children, or I can't do that on Saturday, I'll get it to you on Sunday because I've got footy with the kids. So I do feel that the conversation in the workplace has changed because dads are now they're more involved. But I do think that the women sometimes still have that guilt. And I know that a lot of the senior females do say that they sometimes have this guilt when they leave to pick up kids from school. But I think that just depends on, you know, your own sense of self. And I know that a lot of the women in the firm, they often take on a lot more of the human side of running a team and dealing with emotional and, you know, the people and human skills that also come with being a partner at a law firm.
Such great points in terms of, you know, how women take on more responsibility at work and at home. And I think that you know, we're trying to get recognized, we're trying to move up. Carol, you had some thoughts as well?
Just a couple of points that I want to add to the, I thought, excellent remarks that Sarah just gave us. It's two things. First of all, most law firms, I think, and most organizations undervalue human resources. You know, doing HR and comp committee work, it's often the VP HR who is the lowest paid member of the executive team. It's just a fact, okay? Why? Because the VP operations and the VP sales, those are the profit centers, okay? And although in a law firm, as much or more than just about anywhere else, your people are actually what make the business. But the trouble is that you can't see it on the bottom line in real time. You know, it takes years and sometimes decades to build a team. And it takes a really forward-thinking management group of partners to properly recognize. And I guess my only philosophy is, for me, the people side is the most fulfilling and most rewarding part. And so if I'm not as well compensated for investing my time there, that's okay, because I like it better. You know, and it keeps coming back to the economics, but I had a young woman who was my student and then my associate and ultimately my partner. And she used to laugh at me because I said, I have this big file on my desk. It's called House and Home and Family. And I never bill it and I never close it. It's always there. So it's just, you know, it's just think of it as one more project. And, you know, you make time for your client who has an urgent matter, and you make time for your kids who have an urgent matter. And what the kids want really can wait till next week. You do it next week, just like you do the client stuff next week. But ultimately, whether it's at 1,400 hours a month or at 2,000 hours a month, there comes a time when it's too much for anybody. And so work-life balance comes from delegating earlier rather than waiting till the very bitter end when you're not sleeping. Because ultimately, if you're successful, there is more work than you're going to be able to churn out by yourself. So start delegating as soon as you can. Build a team who can work for you, whether it's other lawyers or whether it's paralegals or assistants or all three. Yeah, don't try to do it yourself.
Great point. Such great points. Especially the delegating. So often we don't want to delegate because it takes too long to delegate to other people, when in fact it'll ultimately save you time. I preach that, and I agree. Any other thoughts from the panel? Lisa, for you?
I totally agree with Carol's point on delegating. It's very important because we are very tempted to do it all, and I think women has a tendency to do it right, and do it right to your own standard. So you expect people to do it your way and your standard. So it's very hard to let go, and I think learning to delegate is very important on that point.
So I'm going to take a turn. I'm going to do a little curve here and throw something different at the panel that that is a segue to what we're talking about. Because as you're working so hard, you're trying to move up within an within your firm. You have to build. You have to take care of your personal life, and it might not even be that you have kids. You might have to get home to walk your dog. I mean, I know I had to do that when I was working so many hours. So there's all kinds of things that get in the way. But one of the things I think is important, and it has come up, is that women respond to stress and frustration in different ways than men do. A man might react differently. They might pound their fist on a table in frustration about something, and a woman might tear up, because that's how we handle frustration. I'm just curious to know from the panel what your thoughts are. I was speaking to a partner at one of the firms a couple of months ago, and he said, look, I don't mind having women in leadership, but do they have to cry? And I just went ballistic. I went ballistic. And I'm like, well, do men have to shout and throw things? And so I love to hear from the panelists in terms of, how do you handle your emotions when things get heated? You have a lot of pressure. You do have to build a lot. You do have to do networking. So Carol, I'd love to start with you.
This is a very interesting comment, and it certainly resonates for me because I did tear up when my firm of 17 years dissolved, and the one of the two other female partners in this firm of 22 partners said to me afterwards, "You can't cry. You can't. Not it's not good, not it's not productive or not helpful. You can't." Okay, so I mean, how do you deal with the pressure? You deal with it however you can, and if people tell you can't, well, then eventually you might crash and burn like I did, and if you can find an outlet for it before that happens, let's just say it's a lot healthier. Don't do it my way.
Okay, so now we're all curious what your way is.
Well, I'm talking about crashing and burning, and ending up in the psych ward in the hospital. So,
oh gosh, okay, that's heavy stress.
That was stress, and that was abandonment, and that was the early 90s. And I can tell you that none of the women who were partners in this law firm had jobs after it dissolved, and needless to say, all of the men did. But that was the 90s, so I don't think that would happen today. But the point is, I think it's really important, whether it's tears, whether it's a week at the spa if there's no COVID, whether it's a week on a beach in Mexico. get an off-ramp, find an off-ramp.
Amazing advice. Thank you. I love that. Find an off-ramp for yourself. That's amazing advice, because it is, the pressure can be high. Other thoughts? Wendy, did you have a thought?
Yeah, I really want to comment on this point. I had a really good piece of advice in my early 30s after I cried in front of the managing partner of a firm that had hired me as their marketing director and was then incredibly abusive to me personally. And she said, look, learn this, that if you feel that coming, say, please excuse me, I'll be right back. And you leave the room, because it is more terrifying to have someone witness your tears than how you feel crying. So if you get up and walk outside, take the elevator down, walk around the block, be gone 15 minutes, but just give yourself the privacy to have your emotion, and don't worry, because they're going to be much happier that you had the privacy to have your emotion. And I really took that to heart, and I've used it many, many times, and I've never had an issue with excusing myself, even without saying I want to get control of myself, nothing like that. Just please excuse me, I'll be right back, and walk out. And it stood me in good stead.
That's really good advice, Wendy. Where were you when I needed you? Oh yeah, you were still in high school.
Thank you, Wendy, for sharing that. Sarah?
Yeah, I think that that's really good advice. I remember a situation where I was on secondment, and the supervising solicitor had given me some feedback, and I was really upset, and I thought I was on the brink. So I ended up going for that walk, getting some fresh air, and resetting myself, and came in and was fine for the rest of the day. And if it has been in the office, going to the bathroom is also a really good idea. I'm personally not someone who has wanted to dissolve in front of especially male partners. So for me, that's been really important to play a very straight bat and keep my emotions in check. That said, I've had no shortage of lawyers, especially females, who have dissolved into tears. I've probably never given them any advice in relation to that, but for my own personal situation, I've taken the approach that you have, Wendy.
You know, one of the things I've studied is that physiologically women handle stress differently than men. And as more and more women are entering into more senior roles in law firms, it's like we just deal with things differently, and it's not good or bad. It just is how we physiologically respond. Like, you know, most of the time women don't throw their, I had a boss that got so mad he kicked a filing cabinet once and broke his toe. Like, that's just dumb, you know, like we don't do stuff like that most of the time. Of course, you know, there are exceptions, but one of the things that does come up as we're talking about this is that, you know, you feel bad, like, oh my God, you start second guessing yourself. And this I hear happens a lot in terms of, you know, confidence and self-doubt, and am I good enough? And am I an imposter? Do I belong here? Like, when things go sideways, how do you get control of your confidence and say, look, I am so good at what I do. Maybe I'm having a bad moment, but how do you stop second guessing yourself and really believe in yourself, especially if you're the only woman in the room? Sometimes it's really hard if you're sitting at a board meeting and you're the only one, you know, the only one that's different. How do you assert and have confidence in what you're saying? And I'll pass this over to our panelists to jump in.
I guess I would only like to say one thing on this point. And it took me, I don't know how long to recognize this, but I think as women, and it's very hard to generalize, but on average, we probably have a little less self-confidence than our male counterparts. And if we don't have confidence in ourselves, how can we expect our clients and our partners to have that confidence? So, yes, building self-confidence, I think, is a really important element. And you can't always expect that just because an unhappy client is critical, or someone else says, well, I wouldn't have done it that way, that they're right and that you were wrong. And so I don't have any good ideas, by the way, on how to build the self-confidence. So if somebody else could share that, that would be really helpful.
Lisa?
Yeah, I don't think, well, I don't have any advice on how to build self-confidence because I'm still working on it. But I just think that if I am in that situation, or when I was in that situation where I'm the only woman in the room, I just need to remind myself that, if I'm there, even if I'm not confident about myself, at least there are people who are confident in me. So I just need to keep reminding myself, and your client relies on you as well. So you just need to do it and just add the best you can.
I think what Lisa's saying is that fake it till you make it approach has definitely come in handy, that sometimes when you do feel a little bit uncertain about yourself, that trying to essentially fake it can help you through that difficult time. I do think it is really important to have either a mentor or a coach or a close friend who you can discuss your career with, and who can also push you to lean in when you're feeling a bit unconfident. I've got a best friend, she's also a lawyer. We are really open with each other about our career goals, or at times when we've had felt like we're lacking in confidence, and we're there to like push each other and encourage each other, and to also remind each other to lean in. And essentially she also holds me accountable. So I strongly encourage you to find that person, and it doesn't have to be one person. I've had a return to work coach. I've also had at different times different mentors, and all of these people can really help with your confidence. And the other thing that I think also helps with confidence is asking for feedback. So for me, I really don't enjoy public speaking, but every time I go and do public speaking, I always try and ask for feedback and take on that feedback so I can learn on what I need to improve on.
So many amazing points. And I'm going to add one other thing as we kind of build into this whole concept of like finding a mentor, finding a sponsor. For those that are looking like, how do I move up within this firm? How do I get recognized? How do I get the juicy opportunities? Like, how do I do that? There's something I wanted to share as well with the group, because this is something that really irks me, but they did a lot of research on women in law, or not just in law, but in business in general at a senior level. And they found that whenever there's a job opportunity, if a man is 60% qualified, he's like, yeah, I got this. Like, I'm going to apply. I got enough. And if a woman is maybe 99% qualified, but not 100%, she won't go for that opportunity. She won't apply for it. So there's that piece of it, whereas, even if men have that natural confidence because there's typically more of them in a room and they're, all together, and women don't. And something that, Sarah said about, finding a mentor, finding a sponsor, finding those that can support you really help. I really would like to know from our panelists, have you either been a mentor or a sponsor, or have you also sought out other mentors and sponsors, either male or female, that have helped you in your careers? Yeah.
Well, I was not successful in the mentor sponsorship area because the only women who were in practice when I was in need of that for myself were women who were single and without kids. And their view is you can't possibly practice law and have a family. And, you know, from the day I was called until now, every second person I have run into has asked me, are you still working? And finally, I said to one of them, you know, am I such a disaster that everybody is trying to get me out of here? What's going on? And he said, you're right. He said, it's just that all the other women have left. So I didn't have one, and partly because of that, and secondly, because I like people, I've really tried to mentor the women, you know, both in my firm and on the other sides of files when I've had the opportunity, because I think it's really important to have someone who's, you know, maybe got a few more miles under the boards, help to say it's okay. You know, you'll get through whatever it is that's making you crazy today. It will pass, and you'll get over it. And, you know, there will be a new dawn.
Carol, I have one more question to ask you before I move over to Lisa on that topic. Have you seen it change within the law firms itself in terms of how many women or men even sponsor and mentor other women within the firms over the course of your career?
Certainly, women have been, I think, very, very effective at have become very effective at mentoring other women. I haven't personally seen a lot of mentoring by men of women, but that may have something to do with who's in my firm. I would like to think that somewhere out there are some men who, you know, want to put time and energy into doing that. I think it does happen in cases where a woman is particularly useful to I'm going to say a more senior male lawyer's practice. And so it's not necessarily mentorship by design, but it becomes mentorship of necessity, but it can still be very effective and very valuable.
Thank you for sharing that. Lisa?
About the point about men mentoring people, I think in general, men are not as patient as women. So we naturally kind of take on the role to mentor, you know, junior staff and, you know, female or males. So I think it's just maybe our mother nature that, you know, that got us into this. But I think women are great mentor by nature. And I'm very fortunate that I have a really great mentor when I joined the firm. She's got a great family. She has a really good work-life balance. She can maintain that for many years. So yeah, I benefited from mentoring and from, you know, a really perfect image, you know, who I want to become. So I want to try and pass this on to the next generation, or, you know, to junior staff. So yeah, so naturally I try to mentor them and, you know, spend time on talking to them. I think they also need a venue to vent out their frustration, and they need somebody to assure that they're doing well. So that's, you know, I try to spend my time on that on a daily basis.
Like paying it forward. Something, any other thoughts on this from our panel? So I think it is important to find in your firms or in your networks, and I think ally law, especially now that there's so many women involved in ally law, is a great opportunity to find those mentors and sponsors and that network that you can rely on and ask questions to. Just, just on the calls this morning and this evening, we've had close to, I don't know, 60 or 70 women, and that's not even all of us, right? Like, so that there's access to it that you have just by being part of this organization. And I think that's something to really think about and look at. I'm sure any one of the panelists would be happy to hear from anybody that's on this call tonight or this morning as well, for some of you. Something else that comes up, and when we talk about sponsorship and mentorship and seeking out opportunities, is there are double standards. I mean, let's just, call a spade a shovel. There are double standards in law firms and in many organizations where women might get pushed aside or may not get recognized as much, or maybe, to Carol's point, at some point, sometimes your book isn't going to be as big as somebody else's, and you have to get out there and build your book, but you can't do it after hours because you have a family. What are your thoughts on these double standards that exist or that you've encountered in firms, in your firms? Like maternity leave is another one. Okay, Carol.
Maternity leave. Well, I didn't have one, so I can't really speak to that. I got pregnant and I got fired, but it's not legal anymore to do that. I think that there is a double standard, and again, to me, I think the most important thing is to not let it eat at us, and for us to know that it isn't just you, and it isn't just me, and it isn't just lawyers. It's pretty much all women everywhere in any kind of environment that isn't female dominated, or at least, doesn't have a customer or client base that is either predominantly female or at least 50-50. If you're a doctor, 50% of the patients are women.
I marvel at what you've been through to have been fired for getting pregnant. Like, that's just crazy to me. Wow.
Well, you have to understand that in the time, I'm going to say people who came before me who had the temerity to have children and to keep trying to practice would take their files to the hospital and work on them while they were in labor. And the woman who again, she was a little bit senior to me, and was the only lawyer I knew female lawyer I knew who had children. She took 2 weeks with each child. And when I was asked how much time I was going to take, because Jackie took 2 weeks, I said, well, I don't know. I know what it's like to have one child, but I'm having twins and I'm not quite sure exactly how much time I might need. Anyway, you can understand why that wasn't acceptable and why I had to reapply to go back to work.
Oh man, that's wild. Wild. Other thoughts, other stories?
Well, stories? How many hours do we have?
Okay, well, maybe from the other panelists then.
I applied for a job and was told that I because I was married to a lawyer, that would be a conflict, and the largest firm in Vancouver couldn't hire me.
Canada's come a long way. Sarah, did you have any experiences with with anything like that, double standards of any kind?
I actually can't think of anything right at the moment, so I might pass to Lisa.
I can't think of anything. Not as what Carol just told us. So I can't think of any story on this.
Well, actually something that Carol said was actually brought up earlier this morning on this morning's call. And this might be interesting to the participants, because this was a question that was asked by one of the participants this morning. And what they asked was, they said, look, you know, we talk about finding a female mentor or a female sponsor. This person said, I have found that in the firm that I work in, that the women are actually not that supportive and are pushing us back or treating us harshly, because they had to claw their way up to where they are, and they expect the same of, you know, of the other women on the staff. So there's a lot of conversation about that, and I'm curious to know thoughts from our panelists about this concept of what's gone on.
I've definitely experienced that. It's very unpleasant. It's really uninspiring. And it basically taught me that that's not how I want to treat other women or anyone, full stop. So I have just taken the lessons that that's not what I want to do moving forward. And it's really disheartening, and it is really unfortunate. I think actually someone famous said there's a special place in hell for women like that. So yeah, that I've experienced it. It's unpleasant. It's not what I want to do, and I assume that just comes from a place of insecurity. I actually think that has been harder. That was harder to navigate than being in a room full of men at times. So that's just from my experience.
Lisa?
Yeah, I think you know, people like that exist in the, you know, within the women's gender and the male gender. I did come across women who's very strict on principle, and if you don't live up to that principle, she's gonna give you a hard time. And if she's your boss or your mentor, then you're screwed. So yeah, I just believe that it happens, you know, in both genders. But I did come across people like that.
It's too bad. Carol had a good expression. Carol, can you share that expression that you shared with us last time we were on our prep call?
Well, this goes to, you know, at least for myself, and maybe it doesn't happen so much in other jurisdictions or even as much here today, but that it's hard to avoid, you know, getting a bit of a chip on your shoulder. Or as I said, you know, if you're clawing your way up the ladder, your nails might get a little sharp. And sometimes it's important to take out a nail file and just file them down a bit. And, you know, when and how much to file them is a really hard lesson, because, you know, we can't file them off completely. Because if we put ourselves in a corner, the rest of the world's going to be quite happy for us to stay there. And so it's finding that balance between letting my nails get too sharp and not having any at all.
Great points, and it is a challenge, and it's, again, I think that the answer to those challenges is to find those that do support you and that do pull you up, as opposed to push you down. And that's not always just other women in your firm, but other men. And what can you do to make change? I just want to take a moment here to talk to the participants and say, you know, are there any questions that we haven't asked? And we have 10 minutes, and I have a few more questions for the panelists, but do you have any other questions that you want to ask that you haven't yet asked? So I'm inviting you to put that into the chat box, either privately or to everyone, and we can answer that question. I have another question, and that is, you know, as you want to move up within your firm, what has to happen? How do you move up? Is it by sitting on the right committees? Is it by having a big enough book that it gives you, you know, by doing your business development and your marketing, that gives you the independence to be able to feel confident in moving up? What do you need to do in order to move up from where you are maybe?
No one's going to turn you down if you have the fees. So the bigger the fees that you bring in, the harder it is to say no to you. All the other stuff, like sitting on committees, mentoring, that all helps to provide a business case for your promotion. But I think that the number one thing that they all look at is numbers, and then secondary is all the other nice to haves. So sitting on committees, what you do externally, or the internal stuff. You can still get promoted even if your fees aren't the highest, but it's sort of a balance between the two, and also how you, what your vision is to continue to grow those fees, and where you see growth being able to happen in your business.
Lisa?
Yeah, I think numbers are very important, but also, as Sarah said, sitting in committees and, being known by people and doing promotion for yourself, because women are not, well, usually are not as good as men promoting themselves. And you need to make an effort to promote yourself. I think that helps too, because that builds your image as a professional, and also gives you more business. So I think that's very important as well, and in helping you getting promoted.
I love it. Promote yourself, build your business. Carol?
I think it's important for women and men to, as they are sort of in the earlier years of practice and heading for partnerships, to again find a balance, because it's often easiest to generate high fee value if you accept referrals of work from more senior members of the firm, because those are the juiciest deals and they're the ones with the biggest fees. I think that's whether it's litigation or commercial work. But at the same time, I think there always should be that, and I'm developing independent expertise for work that's going to be referred directly to me in this particular area. And if you start with a particular area, sometimes it's easier than trying to become an expert in across a broad practice area. In my early days was the Foreign Investment Review Act, because it was new to Canada, and so none of the senior members of the firm knew anything about it. So I became the expert in that area, and it was very helpful for me for a number of years, until it got replaced by something else that I didn't know so much about.
So thank you. So great advice here. Build your book of business, make it strong, have something that's uniquely yours and that you have an expertise in, and don't be afraid to, to fight for what you want. Go after it. Great advice from our panel tonight. All right. So we also have some questions from our participants here. And this one, okay, I have a lot of answers on this one, but I'm going to put it to the panelists first. How do women are always apologizing before they speak. I mean, I teach this all the time. It drives me cuckoo, and I do it myself, especially as a Canadian. I'm always saying sorry before I start a sentence. But how do you curb the urge to apologize? Because it does minimize your confidence. It does to others and to yourself. So I have a lot of answers to this question, but I'll put it to the panelists in terms of, is this something you've had to deal with yourselves? Carol?
I have, and in fact, I've had clients say, when you finish a great deal, why do you always tell me what we could have done better? And I guess it's because that's where my head goes. And you know, I think we can all take a page from Mr. Trump's book.
Which page
Well,
is that?
He's always congratulating himself on the things that he's done that are fabulous.
Okay, that I'll take.
We don't necessarily have to take it quite as far, but I think a little self-recognition helps.
All right, thank you. There's a great video out there by Purell Shampoo. It's called Sorry, Not Sorry. And women all don't, okay, so this is my advice. Do not apologize before you speak, and don't use little words when you speak. So I don't say, I just want to say one more thing. No, just say what you want to say. Or don't, when you're interrupting somebody who's speaking over you, don't say sorry, just say what you have to say. Never say this might not be the best idea, or I think, just say what it is. So don't use weak words. If anybody's interested, I have a whole, there was an article that I read about weak words that women use and how to avoid using them. And I'm happy to share that with you. So you can email me and I'm happy to share that with you. And take a look at that Purell commercial that's called Sorry, Not Sorry. And I can go on this, but that's a big one. We have another question for the panel. How do you deal, I like this, how do you deal with a blokey culture and clients who seem to connect better with male partners who talk about beer and sport? I had a client that had this happen to them where they were invited to a restaurant to be the token female, but really they were just there to, you know, stay quiet, and the blokes were speaking. I'm curious what the panelists have to share on this, if anything.
Well, I'm from Australia. So Australian rules football is really big here, especially if you're a Melburnian. And I don't have a lot of interest in football, but I actually have a pretty good base knowledge. So I can talk footy. It does help that my husband is footy obsessed and now my kids are. So I generally am able to have enough of a conversation with blokey guys about footy. When I've been in situations where I feel like I've been the token female at some sort of dinner or whatever, I make a point of not being excluded from the conversation, so that I will purposefully try and contribute to the conversation. And, you know, it's sometimes about redirecting it. You know, there's always stuff, if you're someone who reads the paper a lot, there's always issues that you can sort of bring up in conversation that generally everyone will know about and be able to partake in it. I think even though you might feel very uncomfortable about being in that situation, especially if you get to the restaurant and realise, oh, right, I'm the token female, I think it's better to actually partake and make sure that you don't sit there silent the whole time looking like you're, you know, a dolly on their elbow. So I would encourage you to speak up and try and change the conversation so it's more inclusive if you feel like you're excluded from it.
Thank you, Sarah. And I just realized we're at the top of the hour. Our time is up and I'm so bummed. It went too fast. We covered so much. I mean, we could go on for hours. I know this. We covered about, you know, how, you know, prioritization, how to make time for yourself so that you don't get overly stressed, finding ways to, you know, work yourself into your career for good reason, learning to delegate, finding mentors and sponsors and other women to talk to that can be a support network for yourself, having confidence, speaking with confidence, educating yourself on things that your male clients might really like beer and sports, which I happen to love, so I get it. I'm going to pass the baton over to Meg to wrap this up, but I want to thank our panelists from the bottom of my heart for sharing your stories. They were really honest and true, and very, very much appreciated by myself, and I'm sure by everybody that's in attendance tonight. I will let anybody know that if they want to reach any of us, you have all of our email addresses, and we're happy to share and talk with you as well. So thank you all for your participation. And on that note, I'm going to pass it over to Meg.
Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks everyone for joining. I just wanted to point out a note that we got in the chat from Jess Burke, thank you, who was formerly with Edwin Coe and now with Russell Kennedy, talking about a reciprocal International Women's Day that she would like Ally Law to get involved in. And so we're going to follow up with you, Jess, on that. The other thing I wanted to say was that we used the session, the women's session this morning and this session as sort of a launching pad for what we are going to move forward with as a monthly meetup, a standing time where we have a monthly meetup with women of Ally Law and a variety of different topics, but mostly very similar to the sessions today, where it's casual and people can share their experiences and learn from the other women in the network. So stay tuned for that. And everyone, thanks again for joining. Thank you to our panelists and Stephanie, and stay well. Thanks.
Bye, everybody.